Working as a cashier at Costco in Miami, Florida, I meet all kinds of people. Some regulars become familiar faces, and you start to feel like you know them. Mrs. Rodriguez was one of those regulars. She was an older woman, always polite, and she'd often chat with me while I rang up her items. Over time, she started opening up about her life, mostly about her husband. She mentioned how he was controlling and mean, though she never used the word abusive. One day, she came in looking more tired and worn out than usual. Her hands were shaking as she handed me a stack of coupons. I asked her if she was okay, and she just gave me a weak smile, saying, "It's been a rough time at home." I wanted to ask more, but she quickly changed the subject. That was the last time I saw her. Weeks went by, and she didn't come in. At first, I didn't think much of it, but after a while, I started to worry. Something didn't feel right. I asked around, but no one else seemed to know anything about her. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened. Finally, I decided to check on her. I had her address from a time she'd asked me to help her fill out a form. It wasn't too far from the store, so after my shift one day, I drove over. Her house was an older, small place in a quiet neighborhood. When I got there, the front door was slightly open. My heart started pounding as I approached. I called out her name as I stepped inside, but there was no answer. The house was eerily silent, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. The living room was tidy, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air. As I moved deeper into the house, I noticed a faint metallic smell, something that didn't belong. Then I saw her. Mrs. Rodriguez was lying on the kitchen floor, her eyes wide open, staring lifelessly at the ceiling. I froze, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. That's when I heard a noise behind me. I turned slowly, and there he was, her husband, standing in the doorway, his clothes stained with blood. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with a blank, emotionless stare. I knew I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. He took a step toward me, and that's when my survival instinct kicked in. I bolted past him, out the door, and into my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. I called the police as I sped away, and they arrested him later that day. He was in the process of trying to clean up the scene when I had walked in. The whole experience left me shaken to my core. I couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez, about how she had hinted at her situation, and how I had missed the signs. I still work at Costco, but I'm not the same. Every time I see an older woman shopping alone, I wonder if she's hiding something behind her polite smile. The guilt eats at me, knowing that maybe if I had reached out sooner, I could have done something to help her. Now, I'm haunted by what I saw that day, and the knowledge that sometimes the real monsters are hiding in plain sight. Managing a Costco in Phoenix, Arizona, had its ups and downs, but I never expected to be dealing with something so unsettling. It started with a simple note left on my desk in the break room. It read, "Something bad will happen in the parking lot today." I thought it was just a prank, a weird joke someone was trying to play on me, so I tossed it in the trash. Later that day, a customer was found dead in their car. There was no sign of foul play, no apparent cause. The police chalked it up to a sudden medical issue, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. I couldn't shake the feeling that the note and the death were connected, but I had nothing to go on. A week passed before another note appeared. This one was more detailed. "Watch out near the freezer section. Someone will slip." Sure enough, that afternoon, a woman slipped on a patch of water that had somehow pooled near the frozen foods. She wasn't seriously hurt, but the coincidence was eerie. I started getting more notes, each one predicting an accident or a death in the store. Some were small incidents, like someone cutting their hand on a can, but others were more serious. The police were involved now, but they couldn't find the person responsible. We set up extra surveillance, but nothing ever showed up on the cameras. The notes became more frequent and more disturbing. A child will go missing today. We had every employee on high alert, but no one saw anything. Hours later, a frantic mother reported her son missing. We searched the entire store, finally finding the boy hidden behind some shelves in the back. He was shaken but unharmed. Whoever was behind the notes seemed to have an intimate knowledge of the store, as if they were always watching. The breaking point came when I received a note that simply said, "Tonight, blood will be spilled." I felt a chill run down my spine. The police were ready this time. We had plainclothes officers in the store, watching every corner, but the night passed uneventfully. Just as we were closing up, I noticed something off in the security room. One of the monitors showed a figure standing outside the back entrance. I radioed the officers, and they quickly moved in, arresting a man who turned out to be a former employee. Had been fired months earlier for stealing, and it seemed he had been holding a grudge. When they searched his apartment, they found detailed plans of every incident that had occurred. He had orchestrated everything, using his knowledge of the store and its operations to cause chaos. He even had drafts of the notes he had sent me, each one meticulously written out. The police told me he had no direct hand in the deaths. Those were just tragic coincidences. But he had been trying to incite fear and panic. He had been watching us all along, slipping in and out of the store unnoticed. The relief of catching him was overshadowed by the chilling realization of how close we all had come to more tragedies. The knowledge that someone could be so calculated, so cruel, left me shaken. I still work at Costco, but I'm more vigilant now, always aware that the world can be far darker than we'd like to believe. Working at Costco in Denver, Colorado, you get used to seeing the same faces. Regular customers become part of the scenery. One of them was Mr. Jenkins, an older man with a graying beard and a weathered face. He came in every day, but I noticed something strange. He never bought anything. He'd just walk around, observing people, lingering in the aisles. It was odd, but nothing that set off alarm bells, at least, not at first. One afternoon, as I was pushing carts in the parking lot, I saw Mr. Jenkins again. He was standing by a rusty old van, the kind that looked like it hadn't been driven in years. What caught my eye was the young girl he was talking to. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She looked nervous, her eyes darting around, but he kept smiling, gesturing for her to come closer. Something about the scene felt wrong. I could feel my pulse quicken as I watched him. Without thinking, I started walking toward them, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I could hear him saying something about puppies in the back of his van. The little girl looked terrified. "Hey, what's going on here?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. Jenkins turned to me, his smile fading into something more sinister. For a moment, we locked eyes, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He muttered something under his breath, then quickly got into his van and drove off, leaving the girl standing there, looking relieved and confused. I stayed with her until her mom came running over, thanking me over and over. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had almost happened. The next day, I was on edge, half expecting Mr. Jenkins to show up again. Sure enough, there he was, walking into the store with a different look, more determined, more menacing. This time, I didn't hesitate. I went straight to security, telling them what I'd seen in the parking lot the day before. They kept an eye on him, following him through the store. It wasn't long before he started acting suspiciously again, hovering near the entrance, watching the kids who came in with their parents. When security confronted him, he tried to make a run for it, but they managed to tackle him before he got out the door. The police were called, and when they arrived, they took him away. Later, we found out he was a wanted criminal with a long history of abducting children. The thought of how close he'd come to taking that little girl sent shivers down my spine. The whole staff was shaken up. We all went about our day, but there was a heavy atmosphere in the store. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily things could have gone differently if I hadn't been in the parking lot that day. I still see Mr. Jenkins's face in my mind sometimes, that twisted smile he gave me before he sped off. It's a reminder that you never really know who's walking among you and how quickly things can turn dark.